Okay, welcome back everyone to Chapter 14, Economic Transformations. And in this section, we're going to look at the world hunt and put fur into global commerce. Okay, the Europeans' supply of fur-bearing animals was sharply diminished by 1500. There was an intense competition for the furs of North America. So with the discovery of North America and even the Russian penetration of Siberia, the world market gained access to massive populations of animals with desirable furs and skins. And as Europe's population grew, the demands for furs and deer skins increased. As the region experienced what's known as a little ice age, there was even more demand for those furs to keep warm. And so this created the incentive for the Dutch to move into what is now New York, the French to explore the St. Lawrence River, Great Lakes, the Mississippi River, and for the British to exploit the deer populations of the Hudson Bay area. Now, the Europeans traded with Native Americans for furs and skins as opposed to hunting or trapping them themselves. I'm under North American fur trade, by the way. And it was beaver and other furry animals that were driven to near extinction because of the demand. And by the 1760s, hunters in the southeastern British colonies took around 500,000 deer every year. So few of the Europeans actually hunted and trapped. They rather they served as traders, bringing their European goods like firearms and pots and other iron tools to those trading posts where they bartered with the Native American hunters and trappers. And trade was profitable for the Native Americans. Many received goods of real value. Even though they did most of the labor in the fur trade, they were not forced, and they made rational market choices to get the European goods that they needed and desired. While the fur trade initially benefited some tribes and groups as they gained new wealth of these new durable goods, the arrival of European diseases and alcohol both took a heavy toll on the population numbers of the Native Americans. And also, the fur trade generated much higher levels of intertribal warfare. Due to social dislocation, the rivalries amongst those tribes became more intense and resulted in brutal wars set against those fearsome epidemics that were already in play. And eventually, the Native Americans became dependent on those European goods. Iron tools, cooking pots, especially the gunpowder weapons. Those were in high demand. European textiles became very important. As a result, many traditional crafts performed by those Native Americans were lost, and the animal species were depleted because of overhunting. And so we see these impacts on the Native American societies, and also, like I mentioned, the destructive power of alcohol, as well as those epidemics on the Native Americans were devastating. But there are some implications of fur trade for Native American women. Many Native women married European traders, facilitating a new cross-cultural exchange, and in Native societies, the status of men was enhanced by that focus on hunting and trapping. And there were some new opportunities that arose for women, especially in the production of wild rice and maple syrup, because now those opportunities were open. Now let's look at the Russian fur trade. So profits for the fur trade were the chief incentive for Russian expansion. The toll here had a similar toll on the native Siberians as it had on the Native Americans. They became dependent on those Russian goods, and a severe depletion of their fur-bearing animal populations also resulted from their expansion and the fur trade in Siberia. And the Russians actually, contrary to the Europeans, the Russians didn't have competition, so they forced the Siberians to provide furs instead of negotiating commercial agreements and trading with them. And the private Russian hunters and trappers competed directly with the Siberians. They didn't have any outside competition. And, as those Russians moved into Siberia, they encountered a similar situation as the Europeans in North America and used the indigenous people to collect furs for export. And they exported to Europe, China, as well as the Ottoman Empire. And those Siberians suffered many of the same sources that wreaked havoc on the Native Americans of the Americas. And so the impact on the Siberians was similar. Disease took a fearsome toll, as did Russian taxes and those heavy-handed tax collectors. And here's a map. I think it's a great map, like all maps I think are great, that show you which areas were controlled by, for example, the English, right, the French, and the Russians. Eventually, the Dutch are kind of not a major player in at least the fur trade. And everywhere you see this, looks like a little house with something on the top of it there. That's a trading post where business was conducted. And the red arrows here show you the routes that those furs took once the animals were hunted and trapped and skinned to send for trading. So in this particular region, they were sent to Montreal and then further on to London. Here in the Pacific Northwest, as well as Alaska, they're going to Asia and Russia. And here in the French lands, they're sent on from New Orleans, which became a major French port, sent on to Paris, as well as up here at the St. Lawrence River, and then, of course, in the Hudson Bay area, on to London. And that concludes the world hunt and the fur trade. See you guys for Commerce in People, the Atlantic slave trade.